So let's talk about the TikTok ban because that has been something I've been watching and haven't really commented on for quite a while, just actually at all, I don't think to date, because I really wanted to understand what was going on here. I didn't want to fuel the fire of inflammatory, alarmist type stuff and just really understand, hey, is this even something we should be worried about? Worried about, or is this something that's really even going to happen? Because I've seen these things come and go where everybody gets all excited and then nothing ever comes of it. And it definitely, legitimately, at least based on my latest updates, looks like, barring some sort of government intervention and reversal of the plans, TikTok's even changed what they're planning on doing. Before it was just like, well, it won't be available in the App Store. There will be redirect to tell you that there's technically a government ban on this, whatever. And TikTok's kind of said, fine, you want to shut down operations? We're shutting down operations. And as of Sunday, unless you change your mind, we're just going to go dark. And we're just going to give everybody the option. Hey, do you want to download your data? And you better, or if you want it, get it, because after this, it's gone. And watching this whole thing unfold has been interesting. And I think one of my biggest frustrations is that what I often see presented in the headlines, I just don't feel is an accurate representation of the complexity of what's really going on. And I think that's from both sides. So, anybody who's watched or listened to me for long knows that if you're looking for me to take a hard stance on one side, they do pop up every once in a while, but it's rare. And even when I do, there's usually but I can at least see where the other side's coming from. This one to me is messy. And, I look at what originally some of the concerns were, and it already raised my eyebrows a little bit when, immediately he's like, we're going to ban TikTok out of fear of China, which to me is just already wrought with, can you go deeper than that? Because we consider them as a country, an adversary, but we also really don't, because we also do all this business with them. So already you're kind of propping China up as an entity that isn't even really an accurate representation of how we treat them, because we're very diplomatic and do a lot of work. So already it was wrought with what's really going on here. And I understand some of the legitimate concerns that people are raising about TikTok. I understand them. It can seem concerning for what may be seen as an adversarial country or empire having loads of data on the American people. I get that. And so I think that's where, it can make sense to say, well, so let's understand that. But as I was watching this unfold, and one, there were a lot of questions that I think should have been being asked that weren't asked. And then a lot of the questions that were asked, like, aha, we got you, they were given really reasonable answers for things. And there's a lot of inconsistency with it. And I struggle with this because I go, so we're going to ban TikTok and to be clear, I'm not even on TikTok. I know my wife likes TikTok. I know lots of people love TikTok. I see value in TikTok. More people search things on TikTok. It's great for getting information around, but it also comes with risks, like any technology. So I understand the arguments on both sides. I see the people who are going, TikTok being banned is going to destroy my livelihood. And I'm like, well, I understand that there are people that's going to happen to. I think that's part of the name of the game of whenever you put all of your eggs in one basket, that isn't really even your basket. That's a risk you're always running. On the flip side, I see people who are like, TikTok's evil and they're, brain rotting everybody on the planet and wasting all our time, and it's owned by China and they're going to steal our data and use it to take over the world. It's like, well, I understand wanting to exercise data protection. I understand wanting to guard the American population. I understand, this, but I also don't think it's as big of a risk as we're seeing. And the greatest irony, if you haven't been following this trend, that to me just shows why you don't go about this the right way and why banning or compliance never works. So if you've watched this, my wife has been sending me countless videos of these things. So there's this app, I don't remember the name of it, but it's an actual Chinese app. It's all in Mandarin. It's run and governed by the Chinese government. And everybody has jumped off TikTok and jumped over to this new app where they don't even understand the language, they don't understand the culture. It actually is moderated and overseen by the Chinese government. So literally all the data that people are putting in here is, whatever. And so it's like, so you were trying to protect the American people, and all you did was actually push them into potentially an even more vulnerable position. And I think that's just what happens when we try and make these sweeping type decisions where we go, I don't like this. Because really, at the end of the day, it's a combination of I don't like this or I'm afraid of this. And I think the other part that is very much behind this, because you can see this even in the inconsistency, is there's a lot of money changing hands and influencing this decision, because we certainly are not applying the kinds of risk mitigation factors. We're not banning companies who are harvesting massive amounts of data on the American population. We're not doing that universally. We're certainly not doing it with US based companies, let alone any companies. But for some reason, we've got our sights set on TikTok and we want them out. And I think there are a lot of players. I was reading an article the other day about who are the big social media platforms, who are the big tech companies that are going to benefit greatly if TikTok in the US no longer exists. And I don't know. I'm actually really curious. If you listen to this, I'm always fascinated talking with people about this because I have so many mixed feelings about it that, and I don't have a big stake in it. I'm not on TikTok. I really don't care about TikTok. It's not something that I've really ever valued or invested in or actually even ever signed up for. So for me, it's like, okay, the thing that everybody loves is going to be taken away. It doesn't affect me personally. But I do think it can, if we move forward with this, set a concerning precedent that certain things, if we just don't like them, if certain people decide they don't like them, even if their logic doesn't make any sense and everyone's going, you have a double standard here. Like, what is going on? That really doesn't matter. And in some ways, I actually think that is what people, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that's actually what people are having more of a visceral reaction to than the idea of TikTok going away. And I saw a video clip of some of the justices, asking the lawyers or something like that. And, they said, well, what's the big deal? Like, can't people just, if people can't be on TikTok, can't they just go to something else? And first of all, I think that's a stupid thing to say. I understand where it comes from, because if you don't understand TikTok, and honestly, even me, my initial reaction was, what's the big deal? But then if I think about it, and something that I get a lot of value out of, or I really enjoy, and I think the justice used an example of like, I may love my old shirt, but my old shirt has holes and whatever. And so my wife tells me to get a new shirt and I might not want to, but when I get a new shirt, it's fine. And I don't really think about my old shirt once it's gone. And I get that can be really offensive, but there is some truth in that, that ultimately, is the world going to stop if on Sunday they turn off TikTok? No. So if you're in the camp of absolute panic and you think this is the end of the world, that if we lose TikTok, it'll be okay. People will move on to other things. They'll change directions. I certainly don't think it's going to go the way some of these big tech players go. People aren't going to fly back to Meta in droves because they lost TikTok. We're already seeing people didn't do that. They literally went to an app run by the Chinese government in Mandarin that they don't even understand. And they're choosing to do that. And Duolingo sales are like through the roof because people want to learn Mandarin. People would rather do that than go back to Meta. And this is why sometimes I look at the decision making and the logic behind this. But my point in saying this was, if you're somebody who's freaking out about the loss of TikTok, hang in there. It'll be okay. I've been spending more time on Substack and I'm seeing a lot of people coming over from TikTok, and you know what? It's creating a new sense of community, and that community, it'll be uncomfortable for a bit and we'll move on. But I also don't want to dismiss that this kind of stuff isn't fun, and going through change, and especially when you know that it's not for, at least not completely, reasonable or logical reasons. And I do think it sets a dangerous precedent. And I do understand where people are going, so what? If the US government just decides it doesn't like something, it can use some arbitrary thing like, well, it's a foreign nation, or it's, I mean, because really it's not that hard to imagine that you go from this to, well, that's run by a company who we've deemed as a terrorist, and so we're just going to ban it because of that. And it's like, I know you could sit and go down the rabbit hole, and I don't like doing that. But I do understand where people have concerns, and I think that's what people are reacting to. So if you're freaking out, hang in there, wait and see. That's the other thing, and why I waited to talk about this is it may not even be a thing. It may have been all a big hoopla, and then the US government backs down because they see everybody over on this government run app and they go, you know what, never mind. We reverse our decision. I don't know. Maybe they won't, and we'll all have to adapt and we'll make some mistakes along the way. But I think for leaders, there's some real lessons here. Leaders, whether you're leading a company, whether you're leading as a parent, whether you're leading as another thing, is this kind of stuff, this kind of approach causes far more damage, and you will never achieve the outcome that you're actually trying to achieve. Let's just hypothetically say Zuckerberg and his lobbyists were behind a lot of this. Is Meta going to grow as a result of it? Maybe a little bit. Probably not what they're anticipating. Probably not worth the money they spent, if they did, on lobbying to get rid of all this stuff. So did they accomplish that? No. If it really was about protecting people's data and protecting the American population, did we achieve that goal? No. If anything, we made it worse. Everybody's jumping ship over to Lord knows what apps, and doing who knows what on these different things as a result. So did banning it work? No. It's frustrating to watch. And so I understand and empathize with the people who are rightfully upset. And I hope leaders pay attention to the response with this, because there's a lot of things, some that didn't even make my list this week, where if you watch human history, like, you can suppress, and I think we saw this with Syria, we saw this with Syria. You can suppress people, you can hold them down, you can kind of say you're doing this while really you're doing this, and you can manipulate and control things for so long. But eventually, the cracks in the foundation just blow out and everything comes falling down, and it ends up being a much bigger mess than it needed to be. And if anything, this TikTok thing, I think, is going to create far more problems than it ever solves. So I will probably do an update next week, because I am really curious to see if they actually go through with it and see what the repercussions are. But I think the one thing I would advise to people is, don't just make hasty judgments or reactions on this. I get it's frustrating, especially if you're a big TikTok user, or if you're somebody who's built a living off of TikTok. I get that, and rightfully so. The peace of mind I would give you is, if you made it this far, if you figured out how to use TikTok and be successful with that, you'll figure it out. If you're somebody who really loved TikTok and what it had to offer, well, clearly so did a large percentage of the US population. So something will fill that void. I would just say be careful that you don't run out to something just because I do see some of this stuff where people are now engaging in this, Chinese governed app. And I'm like, be careful. I mean, at least everything I saw from the TikTok lawyers, I went, I mean, based on what I know about technology, they seem to be operating at least on par with every other technology provider I know. I mean, sure, you can assume they have nefarious intentions behind everything, but you can do that about everybody. And then what? Then we don't do anything. So we'll see what happens. It's been wild to watch. And if nothing else, it's been entertaining to watch TikTok videos my wife has sent me of people experiencing Chinese culture. So let's take it for what we're learning through the exercise, which is people are getting exposed to Chinese culture. They're realizing, hey, wow, these aren't these enemies of the state across the other side of the world who are all set on destroying Americans. It's like, no, these are human beings and they're fun and they've got a cool culture that's very different than ours. And we can learn and experience from each other. And I'm hoping, if nothing else, this encourages that.